His name isn't Mike, but he's going to join us nonetheless on this edition of Mic'd Up here on Pittsburgh Sports Live and Pittsburgh Sports Now. And that is George Michalowski. You certainly are familiar with him on this channel and certainly are familiar with him on Pittsburgh Sports Now as well. He is the Pitt beat writer for PSN. I'm Mike Asti, of course, and I also will be joined by my Mike counterpart, Mike Vukovcan, and we are going to touch on the state of Pitt hoops. We've touched on this before, but it really needs touched on now. George is going to provide his insight on what he's tapped into and his thoughts basically on the program. Heather Lyke has spoken. She has certainly provided some type of confidence to Jeff Capel for at least one more year. He's her hire. She wants to try to stay the course, but it certainly won't go forever. And right now there's that catch-22 that exists. There's been kind of a mass exodus. Certainly Horton's name has been the most prominent, the most recent, and we will get into that here on this show in particular. But he needs to replace the roster, retool the roster. How do you do that when Pitt is in the current state that it is in? However, you need to fix it pretty quickly or you will no longer be the guy that's there. So to get right into it, George, I'm going to kind of go to you with that first. What should the feeling be for a Pitt fan about Pitt basketball right now under Jeff Capel? Obviously, it's been polarized in the last couple of years. We've touched on that on tons of post-game shows. Clearly, it appeared he was going to get another year. That is the case, but there's a lot of work that needs to happen. It is that catch-22. It's hard to fix something when it's going to maybe be hard to get guys there. And he's been a recruiting phenomenon, but it's been hard to get maybe the recruits that he thought he could get despite the emergence of Justin Champagny and company. So what's the feeling around Pitt basketball? What should the feeling be around Pitt basketball? And what are your thoughts and kind of if there was any surprise on this exodus from Pitt, in particular Horton, because that seems to be the most game changer of a exit right now.
That's right. So I think you have to start with the word exodus. And I think this last week, Pitt fans have kind of freaked out with all five players who've transferred. And every single time someone transfers, it's like, oh, he jumped ship. What is Capel doing? Sort of deal. But I think clearly at least three, in Dan Oladapo, Anya Iziakudo, and Chris Payton were completely expected. Jeff Capel told us that Iziakudo, who was a former walk-on, he wasn't quite an ACC level player. We knew this. He told us that he would be gone. He would be, venturing into engineering opportunities, other basketball opportunities. So that first one wasn't a big surprise. Chris Payton, super athletic player. Some may have thought, well, he's a guy off the bench that Capel could have developed over the next few years. But he didn't get the playing time he wanted, out of JUCO coming to Pitt this year. So he's gone. Wasn't too much of a surprise. Then Daniel Oladapo, again, bench player, played, a few games in early season, but he was down to, at the end, I think around 10 minutes a game. Didn't play since probably, February, January. So he kind of tailed off near the end. So just to set it straight, those three were totally expected and not too crazy of moves. And then you've got Noah Collier announcing he's entering the portal. That was a bit of a surprise, I think, to most people. Also, again, bench player, averaged around 2 points a game, 2 rebounds. So he wasn't doing much. He wasn't producing much offensively. Just wasn't getting time behind John Hughley because both of them kind of played the same position. Maybe Collier was playing out of position, but for this Pitt team, they weren't going to play Noah and John together. It wasn't going to happen. And John's staying next year. Noah didn't see his time next year. So those four, not a big deal. Then you get to Horton. That's a surprise. If you talk to, I think, anyone around the program on the last day of the season, they think Horton's back. They think the core of Jamarius, John, Ithiel, and Nike are going to be back next year. And at that point, you're like, okay, you can build around those four guys. Horton decides to leave. It's definitely a shock to most people around the program. And because he's a good player. He's, people are commenting he's not an ACC level player. He never caught up to speed at Pitt. He had so much going off the court. And I'm not saying
that's not to say the least. Right. Yeah.
I'm not saying that's not his fault from earlier in the year. But last year the locker room was a mess. You can't get going. He couldn't find a role as much. You knew he could shoot though. And then this year he comes out and you're like, okay, Pitt might have a chance to make some noise this year if, Nike obviously goes down right away and Ithiel doesn't get arrested. So off the court stuff all over him. He gets back, clearly shows that he can shoot the ball still. But he was just streaky. He can never really get up to speed.
Right.
But anyway, I think Ithiel Horton can be a 40% 3-point shooter somewhere in college, somewhere at the D1 high major level. So whether it's coming off the bench on a winning team or being on a Pitt team like this and getting starters minutes. I know, Mike, you pointed this out. I think he had the most shots on the team in the last 8 games.
Most minutes too.
Most minutes and most shots on the team in the last 8 games of the year. So if he wanted to be that 40% shooter for 10 to 15 points a game, stay at Pitt. But I do believe he can be a 40% shooter at a high major school and not average as many points and maybe win.
I think the bottom line here with all these moves, guys, is that Jeff Capel, he's not dumb. He realizes that, as Mike said at the beginning, he doesn't have a forever contract.
Right.
He needs to win. And aside from Horton, every one of the players that you mentioned wasn't producing for him. And to have a good team in college, it's one thing to just have 4 or 5 starters that can give you minutes and play, but you got to have guys coming off the bench. And when he had to go to the bench, or if there was an injury, or if they're whatever you were talking about, he was getting nothing from any of the guys coming off the bench, and he couldn't have that anymore. So it's not none of that is a surprise to what's happened. Horton, yes, I think even the coaching staff is surprised with that, but he knows that when he goes to the portal this year, he needs to bring in guys that can play right away and produce right away. He doesn't have time to develop people.
Well, that's the benefit, I guess, of the transfer portal. Obviously, it's chaotic. Obviously, some fans can certainly talk about the negatives to the portal. But if you're a head coach, especially with a short leash, and we've seen that with programs like Baylor, Texas Tech, etc., even Wake Forest going the NIT, able to kind of quickly retool and quickly fix because of the portal. You lose a player you can dip in. You also have to remember lost players last year, not this mass exodus, but Xavier Johnson, et cetera, and some of those isolated incidents, but also departures from Pitt. Mike, in particular to Horton, you guys both agree that was surprising. Everybody would say that was a surprise. And George touched on the difference there. I think maybe there might be a personal slight that maybe Pitt could even feel based on this, because they stood by him through everything this past year, regardless of what you think about him getting in those situations or not. Is that something that if he was still there, you could possibly see an opportunity for a quick turnaround if you add players off the bench and you bolster the bench? But his departure makes it so much tougher, because it does bring up that point that, you can fix it quick, but is there a stain on Pitt right now, certainly based on Horton leaving, that maybe makes it harder for Jeff Capel to do the quick fix, because your guy that you stood by talks about maybe wanting more opportunities? That's been a rumor. But he got opportunities and they stood by him. So how could he really say that? How could that be the situation?
No, I don't think any of this is going to stay. This is all individual circumstances. Everyone has a story. Everyone, no matter whoever leaves, their case is different. So I don't think this is going to hurt Pitt in any way, trying to attract kids. I think Horton's replaceable. He is, as George said, I think he has the potential to be a 3-point threat for some team. But the good thing is, I think in this portal, you could target somebody like that. It's not as though there's certain guys that have skill sets, 6'8", 6'9", slasher. Those guys are hard to get if you're Pitt. I think no matter where there's a 3-point shooter out there that Pitt can go out and try to replace Ithiel Horton with. And I want to touch upon one thing. I want to tease this a little bit. I wrote a column yesterday that drew some reaction about. I wasn't real happy. I wasn't
shocking. Mike Vukovcan drawing reaction never happens.
I wrote a column just saying, basically equating Horton and just saying that it's what's wrong with college sports as far as loyalty,
right.
And leaving the program when Pitt stuck with him through, what everyone knew he went through last year. Well, his dad reached out to me overnight.
Oh,
yeah. So
that's what you were alluding to when you said you got an email and a text.
Yeah, he wants me to call him today, and
Okay.
he's going to give me some insight.
We'll do a follow-up maybe.
Yeah, you want to stick. We can look forward to that today. I'm going to.
Okay.
We'll find out, but we'll see what happens. I'll just leave it at that. But hopefully, maybe we'll have more on that situation. But
okay,
hey, George. The next question now Pitt fans are asking is, they've lost 5 guys now. I don't even know, 5 guys. They only have 6 left on the roster. Who do you believe could be next? I think there's definitely going to be somebody next. I'm not going to say they're going to lose everybody because they're not. Who do you believe are the next? Once again, this is speculation, so I don't want to. Right. But who are the most likely to possibly enter the portal next?
I think it starts with Femi Odukale. Sophomore point guard, had it going at Pitt towards the end of last season. Then I think came into this season with very high expectations, whether that was from the staff, I don't know, but outside expectations for Odukale were super high coming into this year. And he had an all right year. He scored, around 10 points a game, 11 points a game, but he never really put it together in the sense that
consistently
a fit to the program. So
right.
his style of play, he's not a point guard. And what Pitt needed this year was a point guard. Like 6'5" guards are great. They're great if they can shoot the ball really well. They're great, if they're a slasher and you have a point guard alongside them. But, Pitt had 2 of them this year, Jamarius Burton and Femi Odukale, and neither one really was a point guard. So the fit wasn't amazing. Like you said, this is all speculation, but, Odukale struggled near the end of his Pitt career, or the end of the Pitt season. So, he had 0 points in the ACC tournament game in Brooklyn. Didn't look overly excited during that game. Obviously, no one would, but So he, I don't know. I'd say Odukale is there's a chance of him leaving. Then obviously there's a few others. Max Madison, bench player, has appeared in 7 games this season. He's a scholarship guy, so you got to talk about him. So he's never really developed a role at Pitt. I've heard from people close to the program that he's the hardest worker, off the court, in workouts. He's grinding in practice every day, but he's never quite caught some playing time despite that. So
you would think a guy like Jeff Capel, though, would love that. Although some have also said about Jeff Capel that maybe leads to this exodus, that he's also very honest. I've heard some say maybe honest to a fault, that even if you're a hard worker, he will sit you down and say, you're just, in lack of a better description, you're just not good enough for this level, no matter what you're doing work-wise. So maybe that also could lead to some of what you're saying. But it doesn't sound like there's anybody that's going to be as much of a backbreaker and a freak-out session that maybe Horton caused if someone else leaves. Because Mike touched on in past shows that sometimes it is the coach, and people don't know this, but sometimes it is the coach saying it might be best for us and you if you enter the transfer portal.
Well, George, I know the one guy that will – I think it'll be a lightning rod in a way, just because the deal with Pitt and Jeff Capel has been being able to attract 4-star kids.
Right.
And the highest kid that he got here at Pitt so far, I believe, has been Will Jeffers.
Right.
And to this point, through 2 seasons, he has not looked like a 4-star player. Well, he's a guy that I think we could talk about all day as far as what is going on with him. You've seen all the games this year. What's your evaluation of Will Jeffers through two seasons, and what hasn't clicked with him?
Yeah, so he was thrown into the fire pretty quickly. He wouldn't have played as many minutes as he has at Pitt through the first 2 seasons anywhere else. And a lot of guys could take advantage of that, but you've kind of seen his age, maybe immaturity on the court, shine through as opposed to improving a lot. So I think specifically 3-point shooting, everyone knows, he's just not a threat. He made 11 of his 53 attempts from 3-point range this year. And when you're on a team that's desperate for shooters, with these driving guards that can drive and kick, if a guy's making 11 of his 53, he's not going to play the rest of the year. And that's kind of what happened with Pitt. So they realized that he wasn't a threat on the wing. He's not much of a threat creating. I would say, if he's at the top of the key with the ball, you're not going to – the other teams aren't worrying about him. They're anticipating where he's going to pass it. So he's really not a scoring threat on the offensive end. He's a good defender. I'll give him that. He's a long, athletic to a certain extent defender. I wouldn't call him like a crazy athlete. Like when he runs, it's a bit awkward sometimes in transition. But yeah, he's just never really put it all together yet. Out of high school, like you said, he's a high ranked recruit. People thought he could be a solid player, but he hasn't really shown that he can shoot the ball. And at his position, you got to be able to shoot the ball. So that's where I think he's come up short.
And that's the thing with Pitt this year. And when people talk about Sabandi and Horton not being there at the beginning of the season, because of that, Jeff Capel, and this is not a personal attack on Will Jeffers, but because he didn't have the two guys he probably would have started at that position, he's forced for 3/4 of the season until Horton gets back to start a guy that's a non-factor on offense. So basically on offense, you're playing 4 against 5.
You're kind of putting him in not a position to succeed early on, and then the perception gets negative, right?
Yeah, for a team that's lacking the ability to score, it's not a good situation to have one of your starters being a guy that the defense isn't even remotely worried about covering. Yeah.
No, and we've seen that at all different levels of basketball. If you have somebody, that's the whole Ben Simmons debate that's been existing the last year or so from the Sixers onto the Nets, that if you can't shoot, no matter what else you can do, it does create 4-on-5 and it doubles somebody else and it kind of ruins the whole experience there offensively, makes it easier on the defense. So yeah, that's certainly been brought up. Mike Vukovcan, George Michalowski joining us here on Mic'd Up on Pittsburgh Sports Live and Pittsburgh Sports Now. And as Mike Vukovcan alluded, you certainly want to stick here to PSL and also PSN for some tidbits throughout the day and ongoing here off of the state of Pitt basketball and Horton's exit, etc. I'm, of course, Mike Asti. Now, George, you heard Heather Lyke's comments. You heard her support of Jeff Capel for at least one more year. She did say the buyout was not the reason why he is coming back and why that support's increasing. Mike and I have certainly touched on in past shows. I know, Mike, you certainly brought up that is part of it maybe for you, and it certainly makes sense to be part of it, even though he's her guy and was a hire for her, unlike, say, Narduzzi, that wasn't her hire, but they stuck through and certainly has ended up working out. Do you believe that buyout was a factor here? And if that buyout was not what it is and not at the number that it is, $15 million, I believe it is right now, that he might not even be back this coming year. And was there any other takeaways from Heather Lyke's comments in particular about the situation as she spoke about everything we're talking about right now? She's going to defend her guy in the program, but there's also a state of honesty that you can't lie to people either. Obviously, there's a sense of it not feeling great, since I also kind of want to ask you before the end of the show who you think they maybe could bring in or thoughts about bringing people in. But right now it's an unknown. You're not going to know. So thoughts about her comments and in particular the buyout.
Yeah, so I think Heather said everything that you can expect an AD to say. I don't think she blew anyone out of their boots with her quotes or anything. But I do think, there's that level of honesty that's like, okay, yes, the buyout was a major factor in this. It has to be.
You figure she can't admit it, but it has to be.
She can't say it, but it has to be. There, $15 million plus for the buyout. Mike Krzyzewski is getting paid not even $10 million to coach this season, and he is the winningest coach ever. That's a huge number to buy out Jeff Capel, who hasn't led Pitt to a winning season in 4 years of being here. And there's been a lot of things. Obviously, we've talked about this all year. There's been things out of his control. But I do believe that, at a program like Pitt, high major school, ACC, if the buyout wasn't a factor, I think she would have moved on. I really do. I think the fans have given enough uproar to inspire her to move on, and they haven't showed up to a game in 4 years. So I think there was definitely reason at the end of the season, but the buyout is a real thing. So this isn't the first time this happened in sports too. So I think overall Heather said what you expect her to say. She has faith in Jeff. She knows it was a bad season. She knows they've got a lot of work to do. And then she talked about the transfer portal a lot. So, people were asking her, at this conference, what do you think about rebuilding a program on the portal? Is it possible? What's your plan? That sort of deal.
Yeah.
And she was like, it's not something to bank on, but it's a huge tool that we are going to and can use in this day and age of basketball, which is all true. And, they may be banking on it. She may not have completely told the truth.
You almost got to bank on it, or
Yeah.
I don't see how Jeff Capel's still there whenever it comes to fruition. That's what we're talking about. You don't have time to do the normal recruiting thing.
Yeah, you don't have time to sign 6 high school players right now and expect to win any more games than you did this year. So
now the question now is, since you got in the transfer portal, George, this is in your wheelhouse here. Right now they have 6 open scholarships. I assume they're going to try to fill every one of them. That number is likely to grow. I would guess between 2 or 3 more guys will be gone. So you're talking about possibly replacing 9 out of 13 scholarship players, which is
wow, yeah,
probably unprecedented.
Yeah.
Give me some names of, for the most part, this is going to be through the portal, because I don't believe there's that many high school guys out there at this stage of recruiting, unless some guys start decommitting, that Pitt's going to start targeting. We could be here for 10 weeks talking about the names in the transfer portal, but who are some guys that Pitt fans, because this is in your wheelhouse, transfers that they've reached out to so far that Pitt fans should keep an eye on?
Yeah, so by our count, the guys we've contacted, they've reached out to 5 forwards, 1 center, and about 7-8 guards by now in the last few days. So they're going after guys pretty much everywhere. Like you said, they've got as many spots to fill as any team in the country this offseason, and it'll be no easy task. Like they've got to. Rebuilding a team in 1 year with all transfer portal guys is an insane challenge that they're going up against. But like you said, there's a lot of talent in there. So they've reached out to and held a Zoom meeting with Jalen Gainey, a forward from Brown, 6'9" guy. He's super athletic. And people were saying, he doesn't shoot threes. Is he another Dan Oladapo? But you look at his tape and they're completely different players. Dan Oladapo will back you down. He'll do a spin move. This is in the Horizon League. He didn't play much at Pitt, but he'll do a spin move. He'll back you down and he'll do a little up and under layup. He's not going to blow anyone away with his athleticism. Going, on the other hand, plays above the rim. He's really long, 6'9". I don't know his wingspan, obviously, but it's up there. And he's going to throw down every dunk he can. He's catching lobs from his guards. These are things Oladapo didn't do. So while Gainey doesn't pose a 3-point threat, I do think he could be a solid contributor inside. The problem with him is he started to hear from, Duke, a bunch of other schools, after being in the portal for a week or so. So those guys, what are you going to do? Are you going to come to Pitt and play on the bench for your grad year? Or are you going to go to Duke and play on the bench for your grad year? So it's tough. It's a tough sell when those guys get in play. But I did talk to him after his first meeting, and he really liked Pitt. So he was blown away by all the facilities and everything. And that was just a Zoom call. So, and then you got Neil Quinn, center that you spoke to, Mike. He was on a Zoom with Pitt last night. He's a 7-footer, and those are hard to find. So they're not going to play John at the 4. I've seen people saying, get Quinn, slide him into the starting center role, and then play John at the 4. You're not going to play John at the 4. He can't guard the Mo Gees of the world. So, no disrespect to John, obviously, but that's
right,
clear not where he fits. And Neil Quinn could be an option at center off the bench behind Hughley. 7-footer. He averaged around 15 points and 8 rebounds a game at Lafayette. So, he's a solid player. He liked what he saw from Pitt, for sure. And then, other forwards we can get into, Hayden Brown from the Citadel. Pitt fans obviously remember the Citadel, and he's a good player. He's kind of reminds me of a football player type build. He's not the most athletic guy in the world, but he's a strong forward, got some touch around the rim. He can definitely contribute. And he told, he told on 3 last night that Pitt's one of the 4 programs contacting the most. So they're going to try to beat out Wake Forest there. They're going to try to beat out Georgia Tech there for Hayden Brown. But obviously, they've still got a chance. Anyone's got a chance that can offer high major playing time in the ACC. Like Pitt has a chance with these kids because of that. And then, move on to the guards. Just to name a few. Obviously, the top guard the name that stands out the most is Nelly Cummings. Pittsburgh native, played at Colgate. So he can light it up. He's 6 foot tall. He's a point guard. And
he's the point guard. Just for 1 second, George, you were talking about they needed a point guard last year, and they had Femi. Cummings is a point guard, right?
He's a prototypical point guard, right?
Yeah, he's 100%. Prototype, right, George?
Yes, he's a point guard. He'll distribute the ball. He'll shoot the 3. He'll create his own shots. Yeah, he'll do it all. And
he's today's point guard. Exactly. Right.
Exactly. And he did it at Colgate, sure, but he played against Pitt. We saw it. He was a threat the entire game. Pitt fans haven't seen a 3-point threat in a few years. Once Horton had a few games this year where he hit 4 threes or something, Pitt fans were like, okay, he's a legit shooter. Guys do that every night on other teams. But yeah, Nelly Cummings, the only thing that I think about with Cummings, he's said in interviews and throughout this whole process so far that he's looking to boost his pro stock this year. So he's been to the tournament 2 or 3 times already with Colgate. He's shown he can shoot the ball. He's got good numbers everywhere, but he really wants to boost his stock. So it's going to come down to, schools like Wisconsin, Arkansas, Oklahoma, Florida are reaching out to him, in addition to Pitt, who's on him pretty hard. And, Pitt can offer him these minutes. They can offer him, here, shoot 8 threes a game and play the entire game and play in the pick and roll with John Hughley. Mm-hmm. It's just a matter of if he thinks that system is going to be best fit for NBA scouts, for international scouts to see that he's a pro. So that's a big decision for him, but he's definitely got some Pitt's definitely got some competition there for him. And then, just to name a few other guards, Brand Freeman from George Washington, 6'2" point guard again. He only played 1 year at George Washington, so he's the sort of guy that I think Pitt will jump on, not only because he had almost 11 points per game as a freshman, but because of that eligibility that he has left. So, if Pitt turns it around this year, if they have a good year, Capel's sticking around, Freeman could be the guard of the future, the point guard of the future. And then, Cameron Winter from Drexel, he's got probably the longest list of schools reaching out to him out of these guys. Justin Hill from Longwood, Jamaru Brown from EKU. So I could go on and on. This list is increasing by 5-10 players every single day. Pitt's been nonstop. Milan Brown has been on the phones. Gilbert Brown reached out to a local kid, Philip Alston from Cal U. So they're hitting everyone. Every Pitt coach right now is recruiting the portal.
Which is what you want. I mean, they have to be. They're doing the work, but you have to be. And on to Nelly Cummings, maybe it's a little bit of a bias, but I did mention I called his high school games when he was at Lincoln Park, and he was a phenom there. You kind of could see that he was that one diamond in the rough, and there were other great players there, that Watson and others that went on to college basketball, but he certainly has had the most success from that era. And it kind of seemed like he did the mature thing. He was mature then. He went to a program like Colgate. He was able to play. He was able to get in tournaments, but he might be that perfect fit in terms of the issue is, and what I brought up at the top of the show, if you have a guy that wants to get in the NCAA tournament, not that that's not where Pitt wants to be, but an increase and an ascension that could maybe provide a confidence to Capel could be like the Wake Forest turnaround, which still gets you in the NIT. If Pitt gets in the NIT next year, that might be enough to say that turned it around. That's a big step. We'll try again for another year. That's still a solid turnaround, but that might not be attractive to every player like that. But he's been in the tournament. He wants minutes. So he may say to himself, hey, I'm coming home and I could actually increase my stature by increasing my minutes and becoming that prototypical point guard that leads Pitt on this turnaround, that gets all these minutes, that is like a coach on the court. And even if that's NIT and not NCAA tournament, I've been there and did that. That still could increase my NBA draft stock or whatever the case may be for pro level ball. So that could be a sales pitch to him that he might be a perfect fit there. And of course, coming home. But again, a really, really mature kid, a prototypical point guard, which is what Pitt needs. But they need others around him. And George, yeah, you touched on a lot of what Pitt could do, the work they're doing, a lot of players they're contacting. They may get some, they may get none, but they're certainly going to get someone and multiple someones because they need to fill this roster, as Mike V touched on earlier. I do want to ask you before we cut this off, Ugley returning is something that is not talked about now because of the exodus of Pitt players leaving, in particular Horton. What would be the difference and the tenor of our conversation if Ugley was not coming back? Because I would feel like a couple weeks ago, some might even have thought that Ugley maybe was a better chance to leave than Horton because they were so in tight and standing by Horton so much. Horton gone, Ugley not gone, pretty much everyone else gone. They need to fix pretty much the whole team. But Ugley at least gives you one piece to build around. You're talking about everyone's fit around Ugley. If Ugley was not there, would this almost be an impossible task? Or what would be the tenor of the conversation then?
I think it'd be insanely more difficult just because, like you said, obviously Ugley's production on the floor next year, whatever that's going to be, is going to be huge for this team. And also, Ugley is your main selling point to these transfers. It's like, come play with this monster that's only 6'9", but averaged 15 and 8 in the ACC last year in his basically freshman year. It's like, come play with this beast inside that's going to draw a double team every single possession. That's what he did. Right. So I think it's massive that Ugley's returning. It's probably what I would say, like it was the last thing. It was the only thing. It was the most important thing for Jeff Capel to do this offseason. We've talked about that, is keep Ugley because it does so many things. Next season, if Capel's still around after next season, John will be there. John could be his guy. So it's a big sell in the transfer portal for him this offseason when adding guys, and it would have been a lot harder if he had nothing to sell with Ugley. He would have just been offering all these kids.
Yeah.
It's like, here, build a team. Like
the other important thing regarding the Ugley situation is I think the way he did it.
Right.
Did it publicly.
Yeah. He wants to be back. It was clear.
Put a message out there, and he threw a positive spin on Jeff Capel, which, very few people in this town have done lately. And I think recruits see that, people see that, I love my coach, and it was just a positive reinforcement for him. And I think in a subtle way that was a key moment for Jeff in the off season, because all you heard about last year was dissension and fighting on the team, and no one liked each other and blah blah blah. Now you heard from the leader of the team, the unquestioned leader on the team, I love my coach. I want to return. I want to make better. I think that was I know the big message, the big story out of that was that Ugley is returning. But I think how he did it in a public display for his coach, I think that was a small thing that kind of got unnoticed a little bit.
Because let's be honest, players in the transfer portal are on Twitter. They see this. they're gonna be looking into players that may be on the team and be looking at Horton. Or looking at Ugley? Do I want to play with him? Maybe they were looking at Horton. Right. It's out there. This is a social media world. Anyone's thoughts, if you put it on social, are out there. So players right. that could be coming are going to look at that and say, okay, I heard some things about Capel. Maybe it's tough. Maybe he's honest. Maybe he won't give me minutes. It hasn't been successful, etc. But wait, this beast, as George called him, says that it's great to play for Capel, and I'm going to be able to figure this out, and I can fit in there. So I can trust this guy more than maybe even a coach or a program. Heather Lyke and Capel are not going to tell you that it's not fantastic to be there. Obviously, they're trying to have you come, but to have one player say that when he didn't have to, he could have just said, I'm coming back. He didn't have to say anything really. It wasn't a force. Right. So
I'll add onto your point. I'll add on, Keyshawn Hall, he's a 6'7" guard in the 2022 class, back to recruiting, obviously, but he's, I tweeted out when Hughley left, this is massive news for Pitt. This is massive news for Jeff Capel. And Keyshawn Hall liked it. So like you said, there's that impact on social media. You guys are seeing it. So Hall's a Cleveland guy. Like Hall's a Cleveland recruit that Jeff Capel would love to have on his team. So these guys are seeing it. They're seeing John come back. They're seeing Marlon Barnes and Coach Chet Mason teaming up with John on social media and hyping the whole thing up. So, like you said, the way he did it definitely had a big impact.
Yeah, Mike Vukovcan, you ever think you'd be in a situation where we'd be having to track likes on Twitter and who likes Instagram posts and reading into it? It's like NFL transfer portal and NFL free agency and player movement we've been experiencing. Oh, George, like this. He's clearly loving that. Yeah.
One guy, before we wrap this up here, we all got to run here, but one guy that I know Pitt fans have, speaking of social media, have brought up a lot, and you've seen him in person multiple times, the kid out of Quaker Valley. Oh, yeah. Pitt hasn't offered him yet. They have scouted him in person. He is receiving interest. Any thoughts on his situation? And with so many scholarships, is that an area that Pitt can go down, or like I mentioned, is he too much of a project at this point for Jeff to want to take on, or because of the number of available scholarships he has, could he afford to possibly take on a quote project?
Yeah, I think because of what you said there, I think there is a chance that he could take on that kind of project. Thiero's a 6'5" guard. His name's Adu Thiero, 6'5" guard out of Quaker Valley. Definitely a slashing point guard. He's worked on his shot. He's had a broken growth plate in his hand for this last half of the season, and all he's done is just dominated the Whippeals. I think they're going to state tonight. So I've seen him 2-3 times in person the last month. He's a solid high school player and a great high school player in this area. He got an offer from Duquesne after his big time Whippeal performance. He'll rebound the hell out of the ball. He blocks a ton of shots because he's got extraordinary length and physicality to him. So he had a massive growth spurt in the last year or two. So he's filled out well. And I think with 6 available scholarships, 6, like maybe even more, I think you can take a chance on him. So I probably wouldn't have given you the same answer if Pitt had 3 available scholarships this season, if 1 or 2 guys left. But if they have 6 to 8 scholarships available, hell yeah, take the local kid and try to develop him in the future. Show that you care about more than just next year. Because, right. I'll add this. I talked to one recruit that I mentioned earlier on the show. I won't identify him specifically now, but I talked to one recruit in the portal, and he said, I really am glad I heard from Pitt, but I'm still have to look more into the coaching situation if he's going to be there past next year. So that's a
real thing. That's a real thing. Yeah.
You can't just push it under the rug. These kids know, they're on social media, like we talked about, like they know what's going on at Pitt. So Pitt needs to show, Jeff Capel needs to show that he's invested in the future of this program. You can't sell kids on 1 year unless it's only Nelly Cummings and other grad transfers.
Yeah,
But
yeah.
it's going to be important. I think they could take a chance on a guy like Adu. So
Yeah, and you know that in your heart of hearts, if you're Jeff Capel, you maybe do know that you're kind of on a 1-year trial basis type of thing. You got to quickly turn it around or you would be gone. But that is important to show kids, hey, it could be more than 1 year. If this works out, it could be more than 1 year. And that's a way with so many positions open and so many scholarships open. You get players that can help you now if, say, Nelly Cummings would come, and then also players you can build around. And that might even impress a Nelly Cummings, who's a local kid. Hey, you're going to help the local kid. I'll come and mentor him, and then I'll be gone. And then he can do it later after I mentored him. So yeah, that's all important. And it is a tricky scenario because there's pressure there, but kids aren't stupid too. They're going to be concerned about a 1-year situation. So maybe that also adds some confidence in there. George, we absolutely appreciate the time for sure. Your name's not Mike, but we definitely enjoyed having you here. I just want to get you out of here with this one last overlying theme, really. And this is kind of what we touched on all the way through. What, in your estimation, needs to occur next year, regardless of who is on the floor, for Jeff Capel to get more time? Is it NCAA tournament? Is it NIT? Is it even just a winning record? Is it a significant turnaround on the court, even if record doesn't show it? Is it something to have a season that you don't have all these external excuses off the floor and you can actually evaluate him fairly because the excuses are certainly there? Is it not having drama? Is it building players? Is it giving Nelly Cummings a chance if he's the guy that's there or whoever? Is it building that individual like a Justin Champagnie? What thing for you needs to happen for Jeff Capel to stay around regardless of everything we've been discussing and can discuss?
I think they've got to be over 500. I think that's a given. I think you can't, if he goes under 500 next year, he's gone. There's no, I don't think you can.
Excuses are gone, even if there's another arrest, etc. It's just got to be. Okay.
I don't think you can deal with another season below 500 because you took a huge step back this season, and like you said, the solid locker room, that's a win. Last year the locker room was a mess. It was a disaster. Everyone left because of specific reasons inside that locker room, personal things. Right. And this year there wasn't that much of that. The team stuck together till the end, which Capel raved about all year. And we'll see, obviously, in the next few weeks if that was true, if these guys all don't leave. So I think they got that win this year in that they kept the team together for the most part. Obviously Horton's gone, but it's not as severe as last year. So I think that he's checked that box, but the production has to go up next year. He's got to win. He's got to go over 500. And even then, if he's a few games over 500, Pitt fans may still be, calling for him out. But to go from 11-21 to an NCAA tournament team is pretty damn difficult. So it's going to take a lot. It's going to take a lot to even go 500. But I think if he goes above 500, he'll get another chance.
Okay. Mike, anything else for George here?
No, we're done now. Now it's time to hit the phone, hit Twitter, and find out who enters the transfer portal.
Yeah, more work. Another day that ends in Y. That's the world we're living in right now. But again, there's positive and negatives to it. And Pitt has pressure. They do need a quick turnaround. Jeff Capel needs a quick turnaround. More pressure this year than ever before. The excuses are now gone. So we will just see what happens. It almost seems like a theme of any of these shows we do with any of these teams we cover, but certainly with Pitt basketball might be more than any other. George Michalowski joining us, the Pitt beat writer from Pittsburgh Sports Now. His name's not Mike, but he certainly gave us his time, and we appreciate it here on this show. Waking up early with us here on Mic'd Up. And, of course, Mike Vukovcan, I'm Mike Asti. Again, stick here on Pittsburgh Sports Live. Subscribe for more of these shows and all of our content on PSL. When anything gets released, you'll get a notification. And also follow Pittsburgh Sports Now, PGH Sports Now on Twitter, and, of course, Pittsburgh Sports Now online for all this coverage, because if you take a break for an hour, you could miss it all. So again, keep hitting it up, keep refreshing the page. Mike has a lot to touch on, including what he alluded to, a conversation with Horton's camp and maybe what'll come out of that. So you want to find all of that there. Maybe Mike and I will touch on